Okay, good evening, everyone. God bless you. This is Father Joseph Swaden. I have Andrew Wilson from the Crucible on, and we're going to talk about the end of the world, or not. That's the basic idea behind this particular episode. It's something I wanted to talk about on Sunday. I was calling it the Coinflip Discussion. I'll explain why that is in a little bit. But first, Andrew, if you could introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson. I am the host of The Crucible. To my knowledge, fastest growing debate channel on the internet.
I've been on a few times. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it was a lot of great experiences. Hold on. I'm just going to say good evening, everyone. So we're going to get started. Basically, let me see here. Now, you mentioned you're somewhat familiar with the basics of the Orthodox eschatological position. Drilled down. Yeah, I'm gonna share this because for those who aren't familiar, I put it down basically in 10 steps, conveniently collated for me, basically off of the Apocalypse of Methodius of Padua, or they call him Pseudo Methodius sometimes. But these are the basics you see in virtually all the fathers. Even Father Seraphim Rose follows the basic pattern. We could just call it Apocalypse Steps. But we'll make it bigger for people. Christian Emperor returns somehow, kicks out the heretics and others. That's very common. Gospel of Orthodoxy is preached to the world. Mass conversion. Stop me if I'm wrong on any of these. The emperor surrenders and dies in Jerusalem. This is closest to the one from Methodius of Padua. Antichrist from the tribe of Dan arises, then follows a massive falling away. It's worth noting he preaches from the temple. Enoch and Elias return to preach against him. The mark of the beast with apostasy. Christians flee into the wilderness. Those who can't escape are martyred if they don't have the mark. Enoch and Elias are killed. Mass war and plagues. Various rulers rebel against Antichrist, and the entire planet is near total destruction. The Lord returns, followed by resurrection and last judgment. Then the age to come with the new heaven and the new earth for the righteous, lake of fire for the wicked. I think those are, would you say that's a pretty solid set of basics?
I mean, yeah, it's as good as any.
Right? It's as basic as it's gonna get.
Yeah.
And just even looking up some of the stuff today was led to interesting conversations and contentions, because there were prophecies that we were looking at from the 20th century, and some of them appear to have been changed. It's just all sorts of wacky stuff. So the idea is going to the basics. Now, the reason that I brought this stuff up, and I'm going to switch here to Father Seraphim Rose. This is an article on orthochristian.com, and basically he was talking about a few different things in this, but this was a talk from 1981, and again, this talks about the return of Enoch and Elijah, and the reign of Antichrist, and as he puts it, a world ruler who will seem to bring peace out of the world disorder and will seem to be Christ come again to the earth, reigning from the restored temple in Jerusalem. This leads us obviously to current events today. As you know, there is currently a war in Israel right now between the Palestinian Hamas forces and the Israeli Defense Forces, and lots of people are dying. I personally don't take a side on either one, because frankly, I'm on the side of the Christians that are dying. And so basically, it has been presented largely as a territorial war. What my point is that it's a lot of people have noticed that it has very religious overtones, but Countera magazine basically did an article about the red heifers. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole thing with the cows.
Well, which thing?
That they need, well, first off, to sanctify their priesthood, they need the ashes of a red heifer.
Oh, yeah. Yep, the red heifer. Yep.
And they got like 5 of them. Like, there's some dispensationalist guy in Texas who's been breeding them, and they finally have 5 of them, so they have like redundancies in case one cow, I don't know, gets a disease or something, or whatever the case may be. So they got these cows, and recent reports have been from the Temple Institute that they can begin the sacrifice of a cow as early as Passover of next year. Well, this is a lot of presumption, considering they don't have a temple yet, but the temple happens to sit on the Temple Mount where Al-Aqsa Mosque is currently. So this magazine, and I'm just going to share it to the screen. here and add that. Basically argues that this is ultimately a giant religious war. And it's not territorial at all, unless you're talking about the territory of the Temple Mount. But let me see here, just to share that, and I'm going to just include a link for everyone here. And so this article was written on the 20th, so that was basically like that was a few days ago. It was on Friday. And I'm just going to get to the main part. People can obviously click the link and read it later if they want to. But the main thing that I think kind of settles it down, because it's talking, apparently it points out that on repeated instances, Hamas has referred to this entire war as based around Al-Aqsa itself, like Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Talks about the cows. For those not, talks about the temple in waiting. They have like a prepared temple to practice doing the priestly services. And obviously they need the Temple Mount to do that. But ultimately, the best line in this is not a war of geopolitics like Russia and Ukraine. This is a holy war fought between the most extreme but militant elements of two ethno-religious groups to either cause or prevent the end of the world. The question here is, this is why I refer to it as the coin flip, which side of this coin is it going to land on, to cause or prevent the end of the world? And I think basically what we can do is take a look, honestly, and see what's the best, take a look and see who has the best case for either ending the world or not ending the world before God flips the coin, for lack of a better word. That's pretty funny. And so, but anyway, yeah, and one second here, because as we look at basically the information we have at hand, we know that there's a guy they're promoting as Moshiach. I'll just put him on the screen here. He's got some music going on. All right, so let's share that. Okay, hold on. I'm not good at sharing from Twitter. One sec. And of course I pressed the wrong button because I suck at this. One moment here.
לראות את החמה המהירה ולהגיד גם אני מאיר, גם בי יש אור לעם ישראל.
That was the Yanuka Rav Shlomo Yehuda. And some Christians are saying that Orthodox Jews claim this is the Messiah, making him, in the eyes of Christians, the false prophet or the Antichrist. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video.
Okay. He started advertising t-shirts. Okay, so we got the picture of the guy. Not that there's anything wrong with advertising t-shirts, but getting to the point. So we have a guy that they're claiming has done miracles. He's healing people, and he's very popular apparently in circles in the old city, like where he gets lectures and visits of thousands of people, and these guys are like kissing his hand and so on and so forth. So they've got a guy and they've advertised him on Twitter as having a better lineage than Christ. So they have a guy that they clearly would like to be the Messiah, and we're in a war over what appears to be, at least on Hamas's side, over the Dome of the Rock, which is where they need to build the temple. And yeah, this is a very good point. Somebody asked, hasn't there been a bunch of people claiming to be the Messiah since the death of Christ? Oh, yes. And I'd like to touch upon one of the most recent ones back in the 16th century. That was actually a pretty tragic one. Let me see if I have that there. Yeah. So, let me see here. So, question: do you have any opinions on this particular conflict? I don't know what you feel comfortable talking about or not.
Whatever you want to know.
Okay. What's your thoughts on the current situation there?
Well, kind of taking in everything you said in scope. The Jews have always, they just like with Christianity, every single year there's a brand new Jew claiming to be the Messiah. So for their version of the Messiah. The same thing has happened in the West. I mean, literally since America was founded, there's not a year that goes by without somebody declaring that they are Jesus Christ in the second coming. This is something which, I mean, right
It's
now,
very common.
I would say right now, there's probably at least 100, if not more, people in America alone that would claim that they are the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then on the flip side, the Israelis have always dealt with this problem too, and the Jews have dealt with the same problem. So I wouldn't. I'm not exactly giving a whole lot of credit or credence to it at this point because it just happens all the time, nonstop. Now, right now, there's a war going on, but is it really a war? I don't know. I don't know if it's a war yet. So, as much as we kind of want to declare that it is one, it looks more at this point like it's an unauthorized police conflict. So, just like
It's
Vietnam
a
was,
pretty,
it
yeah,
looks more
okay.
like it's just an unauthorized conflict. Nobody's really given the go ahead on either side to have this war. And the Arab nations seem to be remarkably willing to kind of stay out of it. They seem to want to get out of the way, at least at this point. So Iran has been doing a lot of bluster. Syria has been doing a lot of bluster. Everyone's been blustering, but they're not really committing boots in the ground. And when the Israelis did put boots on the ground, they ran immediately into an ambush. And why wouldn't they have run into an ambush? That was the plan of the Hamas from the beginning, was to ensnare them into ambush scenarios because they have massive tunnel cities underground, which, by the way, Israel does too.
Yeah.
The entirety of Israel is like North Korea. It's built in two. So you have a huge, massive underground tunnel system that's as big, if not bigger, than the actual nation itself. The same thing exists within Palestine. So the kind of underground catacombs, and some of them actually connect to the Israeli catacombs. So I think it's far more likely, in fact, that the way a lot of the Hamas fighters got in was not by going over the wall on these little, with these parachutes and fans, but likely they dug their way in to one of these catacombs underneath Israel, and they were able to infiltrate that way. But the Israelis don't like to talk about it, and Hamas doesn't like to talk about it. Neither of them want to pretend that they don't have an entire nation built underground, just like North Korea. But as a reference point here, North Korea was so skilled at making underground cities that they were the ones who taught the Viet Cong how to do it, right? So, and the Viet Cong were known for their tunnel system. So there's a lot here we don't really know. Exactly what's going on right now. I would not say that it's even a full-fledged conflict yet.
Yeah, I mean, the death tolls apparently are pretty high, but you're absolutely right in that there's no one really committed to war yet.
Well, the Arabs are committed to a holy war, but the Arabs are always committed to a holy war. So what else is new?
Yeah,
right?
but that's true. But except that, there's a difference between when you're talking about, especially when you're talking about the Middle Eastern countries, there's a difference between committed and committed. Like, all of them say they're committed. However, when it comes right down to push coming to shove, a lot of them aren't as committed as they say. So, the bluster's always there first. I did see an interesting commentary to counterbalance what was in that article about this, said holy war, via Scott Ritter, who I don't always agree with, but I did in this particular case, and I'm going to share that real quick. One moment. Did it again because okay.
Look, the Israelis right now are scared to death. They mobilized 360,000 reservists. Let's just put this in perspective. The vast majority of these people did their 2.5 years military service. The Israeli army is not very good. They have some units that are very capable, some of their special forces units, some of their specialized units. They have some technical units that are very good, but the mainstay, the infantry units, they're not very good. And they become even less good by being pulled back from conventional combat duties to policing duties in the West Bank. So most of these reservists spent their time walking the streets in the West Bank, learning how to break the arms of 10-year-old children, how to rough up 15-year-old girls, and how to belly shoot 60-year-old men. That's what they did. Brutal occupation. It was horribly demoralizing for many of these people. They didn't like doing this. And when they left the military, they didn't have a high regard for the military. So now they're back. But this time, they're being called upon to do something that nobody in Israel wants to do, go into Gaza. Why? Because in 2014, they went into Gaza and Hamas handed it to them. In 2006, they went up against Hezbollah and Hezbollah handed it to them. The Israeli army just isn't that good, and they're scared to death because Hamas is waiting for them. This is one giant ambush, and the Israeli intelligence is blind. They don't know where they are. They're going to have to go in there and probe. And as they probe, they're going to be blown up, ambushed, slaughtered, and they know this. The other thing that scares them is once they go into Gaza, they're going to be committed to that battle with the bulk of their reserves. And if at that time Hezbollah decides to open up a northern front, Israel's got nothing left. And even if they had something left, they can't beat Hezbollah. They can't beat Hezbollah. They know it. They've exercised it. Last year, Chariots of Fire. This year, Firm Hand. Those are the names of two major exercises where Israel tested its ability to fight a conflict against the Palestinians and Hamas in the West Bank and Hezbollah up north. And they can't do it. They don't have the resources to do it. Now you throw in Iran, and they're definitely screwed. So America is stepping in saying, hey, we're going to flex our muscle in an effort to deter Hezbollah and Iran from striking. It's not working. 2 aircraft carrier battle groups and an amphibious ready group with 2,000 Marines does not a war win. And we don't have anything behind. And so I think what's going to happen is that Biden is going to try and talk some common sense. And
all right, I see you disagree there, so I want to hear your take. One moment. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's bad analysis. So it is true that I said this before this guy, I even heard anything from him, but it is true that obviously Gaza is a giant death trap for Israelis who are going in there. There's no doubt about that. Okay. But they're going to go in with armor, and the tanks that they have are no joke. They're dealing with, and they have aircraft systems and everything else. It is true that they are going to be dealing with a mass casualty event, that the IDF is definitely going to be getting shot to pieces. But this is no different than the Marines clearing out Fallujah, things like this. Okay. It's brutal house-to-house fighting. There's going to be heavy casualties, this kind of thing. Hezbollah and Iran, on the other hand, when there's carrier groups that are off of the coast of your nation, and they happen to have some of the best weapon systems on planet Earth for first strike capabilities, no, that does win. That does win the battle. So we can from an aircraft carrier and an aircraft battle group, we could bombard an entire invasion force of Iranians into dust. That is not a joke. That is not an oversimplification. And we could do it because we have aircraft that they can't even see launching off of those carriers. They can't even see them. And the payloads that we can deliver are devastating in open air deserts. So, no, I disagree with that analysis. The Arabs are not eager to engage in a war with the United States because they don't have the capability to strike back against the weapon systems. In open combat, they also don't do that well. They've never done well against United States forces in open combat. They're not going to start now. So I think that we're still kind of in the panic mongering mode as much as people are fearing that this is going to spill off into World War III. It's more difficult than that because the Arabs also need to have some kind of alliance, and they need to know where to get their supplies from. If the U.S. starts bombarding their supply lines pretty hard, what's Iran going to fight with? Hezbollah can fight with basically, small arms, AK-47 stockpiles, things like that. But they're not an organized army with good skilled generals. So again, I think that the IDF basically takes this. And I think that, this engagement may last a couple of months as they're clearing out Gaza. but I don't see it escalating past that yet. It could, but I don't see it escalating past that yet.
So you think they're gonna flatten Gaza?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that would be like that's a lot of. I think that is. I mean, that's always been on the table. It's just that I, from my perspective, I thought from a what's the word I'm looking for? From kind of like a global perspective, that would be like optically the worst thing they could possibly do.
Well, unfortunately for the Palestinians, they gave up kind of their moral high ground so right now the Jewish forces have the moral high ground. They say, look, we were preemptively attacked. They killed tons of civilians. They kidnapped our people. They're holding them hostage. We have every justification on planet Earth to go in there and to call on our allies and call in for our treaties. The people in Palestine, their counter argument is to say, no, listen, we live in an open air prison and these are occupying forces. And it's like, okay, but are they invading and murdering innocents? The Palestinians say yes, but the propaganda has not caught on, and it's not the same, I think, emotionally. It's not as jarring as, oh, we lost 1,000 people in a preemptive strike. So right now, you have 75 to 80% of the American public saying that the United States should send the Marine Corps in anyway, just to help them get the hostages out. So it looks like global support is swinging towards Israel. If I were the Arab nations, I would not attack. It seems like a really bad idea.
See, that's interesting. I mean, maybe we just get our information from different sources, but because to me, it looks like globally, this actually has caused, I'd say, quite a rush of Palestinian support, to the point where now it's nonstop talk of anti-Semitism because anyone who criticizes Israel is automatically an anti-Semite.
That's correct, but both things are true at the same time. So what's going on is you see more of a backlash towards this than you've ever seen before because there's a younger crowd who is now invested in politics. This would be millennials and Zoomers, and this is a global phenomenon, especially if you're talking about Western nations. The millennials and Zoomers are like, look, we're sick of this fucking Arab-Israeli conflict. We don't give a shit about it. We don't care. Have your stupid holy war. You know what I mean? May you blow each other to smithereens and God rest your soul, right? They don't care about it. But we're still at the mercy of the older voting bloc. And the older voting bloc right now has the wheels of power and the chains of power. And Joe Biden came out and said he's a Zionist himself. He definitely has the public support inside of the United States. The latest poll that I saw, hang on, and I'll pull it up for you. Yeah, so this is showing 75% of the American public, at least according to this poll, are not adverse. And you can find that poll right on the Drudge Report. They're not adverse at all to sending Marine Corps members and staff in order to pull hostages out of Gaza.
I mean, but we can talk about polls all day, though. I mean, we know that even the phrasing of that poll question is one that it's heavily slanted. It's one thing to say, can we send Marines in to try to get hostages out of Gaza? That's a very, very small window with no moral downside. It's another thing to say, do we want to commit, 2,000 troops into an Israeli-Palestinian ground war?
Yeah, that's true. But this is the way that propaganda works. So you can find this on the Free Beacon. The majority of Americans support U.S. forces to assist in Gaza Strip hostage rescue. See Israeli ground assault as justified. That's the key word, right? The Israeli ground force is justified in doing what they're about to do. This is the propaganda which is coming out of the region, and it's all the Western propaganda. So it's justifications what they're looking for. And they now have the justification, so they feel like they have the moral high ground. And most of the world's going to follow suit, at least at this point. Now, if this was 25 years from now, 30 years from now, I think the Palestinians would have a lot more support on their side. But unfortunately for them, we still have this older generation that was led by evangelicals listening too much, Billy Graham. And they think that, the Israeli Jews are the chosen people of God and that they must be protected at all costs by Christian blood, regardless of circumstances.
Now, it's interesting because, I mean, you've talked a lot about, well, I don't know about a lot, but you have talked about Christian nationalism with this. We've also seen, in polling, a large drop in dispensationalist beliefs, which are
Mhm.
heavily tied to these particular,
That's true.
yeah. And so we could see a reversal in short order, which is, that's kind of where I'm going with this.
About 25 years
Yeah.
is when you're
Well,
going to start to really see that reversal happen as the boomers die off. And there's nobody who is in between the age bracket of 18 and 30, which are the mass producers of the nation, to take care of the 5 generations after and the one behind. So this is going to be the first time ever where we've lived with 7 generations at the same time on the planet and not had enough of the young people available to take care of the older people. So
that's true.
we've got a serious problem on our hands. And when that kind of responsibility is hoisted on a younger generation, what happens is their opportunity begins to decline, which opens up their eyes to the corruptions of their own nation. So I think that you are seeing kind of a slow awakening happen, but it is still slow. And right now, this is still evangelical land, and there isn't a damn thing anybody could do about it, at least for the immediate foreseeable future. And the evangelicals support the Israelis. And so the presidents are going to support the Israelis, and the government's going to support the Israelis.
Well, I don't know. 25 years sounds, I think, I'd almost say it sounds a little pessimistic. I mean, I wouldn't give it more than 15. But the reason I say that is because a lot of the things are changing right now. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we've talked about, I mean, not us personally, but we've talked about things like Agenda 2030. But now you're starting to see more and more things popping out. First, it was in state laws in like New Mexico, then in the UK. Now the goal is 2035. They're starting to realize that the plans that they had, and I personally think that this is part of that as well, aren't working. They don't have enough time to do what they're trying to do. But in this particular case, when talking about, whether they're going to successfully clear the Al Aqsa Mosque, which I think is the ultimate goal in all this, I just don't know how successful that's going to be. I don't know. And that's why, again, I refer to it as a coin flip, because ultimately, I think that there's enough that could be said on either side where it's not really clear what's going to happen. And realistically, I don't, I see a lot of people trying to point to different prophecies of different elders and so on and so forth.
That's never a wise idea.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
Right, 'cause right now there hasn't been one of those prophecies or timeline events that you posted which has been fulfilled, nor is there a pathway anybody could guarantee to how one would be even fulfilled right now.
I agree completely.
So I think that that's all shooting in the dark. Not only that, this is not the first time that the Israelis have been involved in a conflict within their region, where there's a Billy Graham who's right there saying, "This is the end. This is the thing that ushers it in. Jesus is coming tomorrow." Right? I've heard this my entire life. Anytime that there's a regional conflict there, but remember that that's also part of Israeli propaganda. The part of their propaganda is to say that you have an obligation to support our nation as evangelical Christians because we're the chosen of God, and this is where Armageddon is going to happen. And so, if you want to be good with God, you got to support us in our great and noble quest to do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah. And I do want to, not the position even of most Israelis. It's the position of a few hardline groups like the Temple Institute, who just happen to coincidentally have a whole lot of money and power. However,
a whole lot of money and power.
That said, that doesn't mean that next year they're not going to be having the 5 cows as a shawarma barbecue. I mean, ultimately, we really don't know what's going to happen there. It's still too early to tell. I kind of disagree on global views on who's really supported in this, but that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, that's not what's going to make the determination of the end times.
Well, there's these. If you're looking at propaganda, it's interesting because I've studied propaganda a lot, and I mean, going back to Philip Morris and the great campaign for the smoking ads, which basically turned the West into the same kinds of smokers that it turned the East into, right? I mean, the propaganda which happened was not by a person with a psychology degree, by the way, by a regular Joe, just a marketing whiz, okay, marketing guru. But it was definitely all propaganda based. When you kind of take a bird's eye view, you recognize a couple of things. The first is that propaganda is layered. So your bird's eye view layer is the kind of macro propaganda. So in this case, we're talking about the mainstream news media. We're talking about whatever your various state departments around the world are saying. You're talking about whatever kind of the global machine is putting out inside of the blogosphere, inside of the news networks, their different blogospheres, all of this. They don't even call it a blogosphere anymore, but you get the kind of point, right?
Yeah, I know. I remember when it was.
Now, as you move into the kind of micro analysis, you start to look at things like Twitter, and you start to look at things which, though they have a lot of global reach, they still cannot compete against the kind of mass government, State Department, news media apparatus which is there, who still hold about, I'd say about 70-75% of people's hearts and minds still are with this kind of mainstream thing. Now, that sounds like it's overwhelming, but it used to be about 95%, 99%. So it's actually way better now than it's ever been.
Oh, I
Which
agree.
is why I think when you look kind of at the micro level and you look at Twitter and things like this, where they're allowed to have an opposing opinion, where it's even allowed to have, people are actually seeing it for the first time. And so I think they greatly overestimate how large that opinion group is, because just remember, before Elon Musk had taken over Twitter, you couldn't even have this conversation. This conversation would not have ever even have been allowed. So the fact you see so many people kind of push back against the mainstream and Israeli narrative, it looks like a massive representation, but it's really not. It's just that it appears that way because you've never seen it. You know what I mean? You just never get to see it anywhere. And finally, you are starting to see the pushback. People are calling into guys like Alex Jones and saying, no, it's time for you to back off on some of this support. And he's like, okay, maybe it is. So the narrative is starting to seep through, but it's only getting through these kind of cracks, which are just beginning. The formation of the alternative media started when I was a child. But it was with these kind of fringe groups and fringe personalities, and they were able to dismiss it as conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, this kind of thing. But as it's moved forward, it's gained, many of these different places have gained like almost their own establishment sense of credibility.
There is an established new right. Yeah.
Right. So there's almost an establishment sense that there's some credibility there that we can look to. And now people are beginning to, but it's only just beginning. That's the thing. It's like, it's going to take still a while before you start to see us get back to maybe like the golden days where we had AM radio and guys like Rush Limbaugh and the conservative right and this and that. Though they only operated really within these AM radio waves, that was enough of a market share to really put a dent in the mainstream media's narrative about things. But they did away with all of that. So once AM became obsolete, what happened was these companies began to build these platforms like YouTube, things like this. And because everybody was gravitating there for the kind of news in the space for the public, they were just able to deplatform all opposition, which AM radio couldn't do. So we're just now recovering from all of this.
Well, I mean, I tend to think, and this is just because, keep in mind now, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. This is something to keep in mind. I had a nice little following on Twitter in 2021, and I tossed it out because, frankly, a lot of people that were kind of being deplatformed at that particular moment. That's when a lot of the waves of deplatforming began. And I moved basically to Gab and said, I'm not looking back. And I just use it with my NFTU account, which became my de facto Twitter account, which is really small. But the point I'm trying to make with this is that from my perspective, and this is, again, coming from outside, being out in the fringe, if you will, is that Elon is kind of selectively putting another box around like the viewer, if that makes sense. So like, even if there's relative freedom compared to what we had, and what we had was terrible. What we had I don't know how old you are, but the point is, I remember what it was like in the 1980s, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. You had your 5 television stations, or if you're in New York or a big city, you're lucky you had 7 television stations, and you had your FM radio, your AM radio. You got your local papers. The only way anyone got any real news from around the world was, frankly, you'd have to go to like one of these big newsstands where you'd have to look at, like, they had these international newsstands in New York where my dad would take me, and he'd get the news from Argentina and from different countries. And but ultimately, if you didn't do that, you were limited basically to your local library, the television set, and the radio stations.
Yeah, and that all occurred because originally journalism inside of the United States, especially with the advent of the TV, started out as being very high integrity. So this was very high integrity, so people had a lot of faith in it. Now, to be a journalist, you're considered a lawyer, right? You're considered on par with a lawyer. You're just kind of like a bottom-feeding scumbag. Nobody wants anything to do with you. You don't give a shit about the truth. You're just after the next big story. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
There's a lot of truth to that. So people, when they lose faith in these kinds of institutions, which in the 80s, even then, the faith in the government and media institutions was still very high.
Yeah, this is only 10 years maybe that we have.
But
this
moving
into
moving into the 90s, that's when you really started to see the decline. As alternative media like MTV, things like this started up, and people were able to voice alternative opinions. You started to see kind of this small shift happen. But now all those people who were kind of anti-Rage Against the Machine, like the band Rage Against the Machine, are now the Machine. And they come out and they're as big an establishment shills as the establishment that they used to rage against. And what happens is it's a form of comfort, really. It's like, I'm just going to join the winning team. It's almost like I give up. I'll just join the winning team. I'm rich. You know what I mean? I have my private security and I can do what I want. So who cares? That's basically where a lot of them end up.
Yeah. And so ultimately, even when so from my perspective, obviously Twitter and Facebook, and even just the internet in general, which, mostly started in the mid 90s, was a great and open, resource of information that has eventually, especially in the social media era, been tamped down. Few people, I think I'd probably say a very significant percentage of people don't actually know what a website is. And so they basically, the internet is the buttons on their phone, and that's it. And so it's becoming a very tightly controlled structure as well. And we saw that with Twitter, it kind of happened so rapidly in 2021 that you started seeing this mass deplatforming, that Elon Musk releasing it to a large degree. I'll say, to be fair, a large degree. He mostly just doesn't allow people he personally hates on or something like that. But outside of that, it's still relatively...
Well, it's good to be king.
Yeah. Well, but it's funny that, they have pointed out that there are still deplatforming tools. From my perspective, out on the fringe on Gab, where I have, a pretty happy following, and, we get reports almost daily or weekly of people who have been shadow banned for some reason, or so on and so forth. It's not as free as it looks, is my point. And,
no, of course not. The thing is, though, is like, look, a lot of this has to do... if you're talking about, I know we're kind of veering off the topic a bit, but just to kind of wrap this end of it up, a lot of that deplatforming actually happens not even due to government intervention or governments wanting to do it, because in some ways it's actually better for them if there's tons of misinformation out there. So that's actually better for the government in many ways than having the spotlight put on them with accurate reporting. So in many ways, misinformation, that would be something they would veer towards. But what ends up happening is corporate interests, they are the ones who are the commercial advertisers. And the truth is that people with your views and people with my views are not very commercially friendly. And the reason we're not is because women control the dollar essentially on spending. And because they control the dollar on spending, it's going to, all the commercial advertising is basically going to focus around things that they think that women are going to want to watch and view. And this is because women do 70 to 80% of the market spending total in the United States. They do most of the household spending. So That's why when you go to YouTube, things like this, they'd rather just get rid of all the political content and do videos about cats and nails and how you brush your hair and makeup videos and makeup tutorials and shit like that. They don't care about politics at all. They consider it to be kind of this fringe thing that is almost useless to them. I think if they could wave a magic wand, they would just get rid of it, just like Twitch has started to do, because they just want video games only. That's not controversial, and the advertisers stay.
Interesting. Now, so that's, you see, my personal view is that at least the reason why a lot of these companies are moving in this kind of more leftward direction is largely due to, DEI programs that are being pushed by basically hedge funds like BlackRock. And they're basically, how should I put this, or underwriting, I would say, the change in these, the change in these kind of focuses that companies like YouTube, et cetera, are doing. And I'm not criticizing YouTube, of course. No, I am. I mean, but the point is that it's, they're being funded by other sources. I don't think it's simply the marketing dollar. There's also the underlying investment dollar that's, I hate to say it, has kind of been driving a large part of this economy. It's, ultimately, that's part of I'm sure you know about the real estate bubble that's been forming because of private investor groups like BlackRock, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're seeing here is, for the first time, I would say probably, at least to my knowledge, the idea of whether it's the military-industrial complex, the advertising industries, etc., people are starting to see the kind of the real faces behind who's doing stuff like this. And these global magnets, unfortunately, kind of like everyone knows who Klaus Schwab is now. If you had asked 15 years ago who's Klaus Schwab, I guarantee you 99 out of 100 people would not know.
I think they still don't.
I think it's more like 10 out of 100 people. I mean, like 90 out of 100 people.
Well, I mean, people who even pay attention to politics are a small fringe minority anymore. So, but most people, I think that they'll get it to the point where most people vote, but that doesn't mean most people are informed when they do. And so what we've ended up with inside of the social structure of the United States is a bunch of misinformed and ignorant voting blocks. And they don't even know what the hell they're voting for. Oftentimes they vote against their own interests while they're being told that they need to vote and have a duty to do so because it's in their interest, when the opposite is true. So I think a lot of this, yes, it is true what you're talking about when you're talking about special interests who try to kind of push these different agendas through U.S. government policy. And there's foreign actors who do that as well. Like you said, private military actors who do that as well, PMCs, which are becoming a thing globally again. But ultimately, it's usually the simple explanations that give you some of the best kind of purview into what's going on. And think of it yourself. If somebody came in and said, okay, you are now the CEO of YouTube, the largest video sharing website on planet Earth, which rakes in billions and billions and billions of dollars. Here's all of your shareholders. They all expect to have X amount of dollars per year, and that year continuing to increase their holdings, or else we're going to remove you as the CEO. The shareholders are going to remove you as the CEO. So here's what we see. The videos that are mostly reported are videos of these right-wing people talking about trans issues and talking about social issues and talking about these things. And the videos that make you the most amount of money with the largest followings are chicks brushing their hair. Which one would you want the algorithm to promote for you?
It's a fair point. Now, again, that is, ultimately, that's probably, I would say, probably what Elon's motivation is ultimately when buying Twitter. He wanted to make it profitable, and he's doing everything he can to do that.
I think he also did want to have a free speech platform. I think that he wanted to have a controlled free speech platform. So in opposition to Gab, and
you think he was going after Gab?
I think that a lot of people have been going after Gab I think that they purposely pretend it's not there. And then when they have to kind of contend with the fact that it is there, I think that it was only a matter of time before alternative systems were put in place that were not as free speech as Gab, but give you the illusion that they are.
Parler, Truth Social.
Right. All of these different things which come up, and it seems like Twitter has just become kind of a dampered down version of Gab. They'll let in any of the stuff that they call anti-Semitism to a degree. To a degree, they will, as long as there's some type of contesting view and things like this. But also remember that they're letting in other things that Gab won't let in, that like pornography and things
That's
like
right.
this,
Yeah, I was
for
going to say
instance.
porn.
And
But I thought
that cheapens it.
I heard that isn't Elon considering banning porn from the platform though?
No, they're not going to. It's too much of a moneymaker. They won't ban it, but what they'll do is they'll make it so that you don't have to see it when you're just scrolling down your timeline.
Okay.
Which that would have made Dorsey roll over and screech bloody murder, because he knows that the best way to bring in advertisers is if basically randy young men are scrolling through their Twitter doing something innocuous like looking up video game stuff, and all of a sudden there's some big breasted woman there who's naked. They click on the profile, they get paid for that link click. You know what I mean? It's big business. So I think Elon Musk will curtail some of that, but they'll never really curtail it altogether. There's just too much money in it. There's so much money in pornography in the day and age of the lonely young man on all of these social media platforms, that curtailing it would be like, if you were the person who made that decision for your business to curtail that, you might be getting rid of upwards of 30-40% of your income. Even if you're not reporting that is 40% of your income, it's probably a pretty high share of it.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think they're going to get rid of it completely. No way.
Which means basically, I mean, in that sense, it means that I hate to say it, but at this point, Gab is kind of invulnerable because they made that decision a couple of years into it, and it was a disaster before they did. And
you mean
frankly,
for porn? Yeah. So I mean, that's really kind of a high integrity decision, because Gab does not have traditional people that they can go to for advertisement like a company like Twitter would have.
Right.
And we saw the ADL they took away tons and tons of Twitter's market ad revenue just by running an anti-Twitter campaign, an anti-X campaign, which, by the way, was part of the reason of the rebranding to X, I believe, was that they were trying to draw in other people with a new name so that they wouldn't associate Twitter and Elon Musk. They would just, they would look at it from a different angle. But ultimately, no, he's not going to get rid of that market share. And for Gab to do that, that's why it requires so many individuals to actually send in cash to keep Gab going. Because other than porn, what other types of traditional outlets for advertising do they have? They don't have any. I mean, the ADL has run the kind of most vilifying campaign against Gab that I've ever seen. And it is true that there's tons of Nazis and anti-Semites on Gab. Nobody disputes that. But that's kind of the point. The whole point is, if you wanted to have a Wild West rodeo, then you're going to let in Nazis, and you're going to let in commies, and you're going to let in anybody who wants to come on. That's the whole point, right? That's the whole point of it.
Met them all.
Anyway, let them all in, and then you have the block button if you don't want to see their stuff. But that's not good enough, right? To just be able to ignore it. You of course you have to go after it with guns blazing, which the ADL has done non-stop against Gab. Not just the ADL, but almost every single quote hate watch group has gone after them, because they won't ban guys like Fuentes. They won't ban tons of these different people that Twitter will not let come back to the platform.
Yeah. And what I find funny about that is that they've turned that around really successfully in terms of a marketing scheme. Whenever one of these groups like Hate Watch, et cetera, writes something that just has, Gab or Andrew Torba's name in it, it's going out as an advertisement. Like, they're like sending it out like, come on, give us some more money because, they're after us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know Torba, and I'm pretty familiar with his right-hand man, Rich. I mean, I've talked with him. I went up to the Orthodox Montanica with him, and it
Torba?
was not with Torbo, with his right-hand guy. And
Oh, okay.
he actually rode out with me and my wife. And I mean, we talked for, I don't know, what was the car trip, like 15 hours both ways, you know what I mean? So we had nothing but time and talk. And no, Gab has not done nearly as well financially as it could because it kind of made these high integrity decisions. Is that going to pay off on the back end for them? Yeah, it
Long term,
probably
yeah,
will.
absolutely.
It probably will. But it's not going to for a while. And they've tried to do other things like Gab Pay, trying to
Yeah,
run in these kind of
I'm a user.
yeah, they're trying to run in kind of their Torba's vision of this alternative economy, which
Mhm.
exists on top of the economy that's already there. The only problem with that, of course, is forcing an economy usually doesn't end up well. It has to be something which supplies itself due to the fact that the need is there for it. So you usually don't have to do anything for there to be an alternative economy. People just gradually gravitate towards that anyway if there's some need that's not being met that they have.
Yeah.
So I think that it's good that they're laying the groundwork for that because maybe the need will be there. But it's Gab's ahead of its time. It was always an idea ahead of its time, and I don't think its time has come yet.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm a big fan. I use it a lot. It helped me personally in the sense that it allowed me to amplify my voice where I couldn't. Um, I have seen people go through deplatforming. I have family who have gone through deplatforming. The Gab Pay thing is actually it's picking up because I know that they're moving into what do you call them, direct deposit accounts within the next, probably couple of months. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're correct that a parallel economy naturally forms. One cannot force it. And if we like, there are people, and I don't know them too well personally. I've seen that there are people, and I believe Torba might be one of those people who mostly buy all their stuff on Gap. If you're doing that, that to me, it's a kind of a high cost analysis. Like if I can get something at the Dollar Tree for $1 and it's going to cost me $10 to buy it in some parallel way, I'm not going to do it. It's just, but I think the concepts behind parallelism are there. It's easier for me to go to get locally farmed meat than it is to order it on Gab.
But is that a parallel economy? I'm not sure that that's a parallel economy. So what Torba's vision is he wanted a parallel multimedia platform that
Right.
every single person could use.
Mhm.
That was necessary. That did not exist. The need for that was overwhelming. And you could tell that the need for that was overwhelming and it wasn't just due to all of the deplatforming. It was also due to the fact that people who weren't deplatformed clearly couldn't say a lot of the things that they wanted to say. And it was quickly becoming taboo, a cultural taboo to even say the things that you wanted to say, and still is. So the fact that a parallel multimedia verse could exist, that the market desperately needed. But does the market desperately need an alternative way for you to run your credit card for an item? It doesn't. Does it, does it need for you to find a more convenient way to shop? No, it's pretty much got that covered. A parallel economy would have to be something which was set up that would give you something that you needed in a convenient way that nobody else is doing. That's
Yeah.
the way that you would produce goods and items that people wanted. And Gab is not able to do that with anything currently except multimedia. They seem to be trying to lay the groundwork and infrastructure to do that later, as maybe some of these things might collapse, but I have no idea how it's going to go. It doesn't seem to me like it's going very well at all.
Well, now, what do you use Gab currently?
Yeah.
Okay, because I mean, basically, it looks like the way I would describe it is this: what it seems Torb is describing as a parallel economy is still being used in the sense that it's kind of, for lack of a better word, a marketing term, because we're seeing a lot of right wing groups using this parallel economy terminology. Ultimately, it's a copy of Facebook Marketplace. And so what it comes right down to is, will people find the products that they need on that? Will they use it first? Will it become their primary? I disagree on the thing about credit card processing. I
What's
know
it
people have been
what's it replacing though? Like, what's it replacing that you can't find on Craigslist, or you can't, like, that's the thing, is what is the market alternative that Gab's going to give you that you can't give anywhere else other than multimedia? And the answer, I think, is nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, some would argue that like Public Square doesn't, is doing what Gab Marketplace is doing as well. I'm not a spokesman, but the point is, I would never imagine that a parallel economy would rely on one website. It's not realistic. It relies on multiple actors. You need buyers and sellers ultimately, and if it's the farm down the street versus a farm that I order from on Gab, to me, it's still part of a parallel economy. It's just that it's one part of it's not on Gab and one part of it is.
Yeah, I don't understand though. What is it a parallel to? So, like, when I think of a parallel economy, I think of, if I go to you and I'm like, I have a goat and I'll trade you this goat for like 20 chickens. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
now
barter.
but now we've taken the tax man out, we've taken the government out, we've taken the merchant out, we've taken kind of everything out. So let's say the whole community just kind of operated this way, like the Amish. That would be a parallel, and the Amish don't even, right? They still have to trade with the English all the time, use our currency, this kind of thing. But let's just say that they were able to do this. That would be a parallel economy. So that would be an economy existing inside of our economy that people could use as an alternative. You know what I mean? Gab's not anywhere near that with anything except pure multimedia.
Yeah, and I don't think it could be represented to be more than that really in that space
I
outside
agree.
of the marketplace. So, but in terms of a parallel economy, my sole point was that, and you're right about the Amish, all those communities, the Mennonites, etc. To some degree, I would say that those are parallel economies, even if they're using US dollars. I mean,
I would say to a large degree, you would be right that that's a parallel economy that's just tax free. And we have no idea what they're buying and trading. We have no idea if they're building gun. We have no idea what the hell they're doing. And nobody cares, right? It's out of sight, out of mind. Nobody cares. And that's definitely a parallel that does not exist within the current economic structures. So when people are making economic policy, they're not ever thinking, what about the Amish though? Right? They never think, what about the fastest growing demographic in the United States, the Amish? They don't even think about it because they just don't exist.
That's what's
right.
interesting.
Torba does. That's true. And he uses this kind of ideology to understand that there could be some groundwork in the future for how we could not utilize technology in order to have some type of localization or parallel economy. But that's, I don't even know. I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I just don't even understand how in 2023 that would look.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, well, he uses the term neo-Amish, which seems to imply that he's kind of more in favor of keeping the technology, but trying to stick with the religious values insofar as you can. But I mean, we live, in a time where people are using crypto, for example, in very creative ways.
Tell the governments buy all that up too.
I don't know if that's possible. I don't even think the U.S. government can buy all of the existing Bitcoins, let alone all the other coins, the privacy coins like Monero or Litecoin Network, etc.
But a lot of those don't do very well, right? So a lot of the alternatives in the cryptocurrency that are alternatives to Bitcoin, they just don't really do nearly as well. And when I think about the Bitcoin holders and the fact that we've kind of hit the threshold where there's not going to be a lot more Bitcoin which is mined, what's going to happen is the sum of all fears, and that is that the coin that is mined is going to begin to slowly become consolidated by a few people, which is what always happens. And then from there, it's which government wants to get the fortune by either confiscating it or whatever they need to do. So it's just something to think about. I've always been wary of cryptocurrency. I think that savvy buyers, traders, and sellers can definitely make some money at it. But I'm still remain highly unconvinced as far as long-term trade value for cryptocurrency.
Well, I mean, I'm mixed on that. I like crypto. I think the coins that I mentioned in particular, BTC, LTC, and XMR, are not going anywhere. Same with Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, but why not just go buy gold?
That's a solution as well.
Why not just buy gold and buy, like, that's something that
silver is my thing because it's just small. It's cheaper and smaller.
well, and you'll always need it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most silver ends up in a landfill. But I mean, they're always mining more silver out, but gold, you can't get more gold. And I think that 90% of the gold which has existed in the world still exists to this day, kind of being traded around. But gold is necessary for electronics and everything else. It's always just been odd to me why people put so much faith in cryptocurrency. When you always know that there's at least something that's always going to have some kind of value to it,
Well, I mean, I guess that's one argument. I'm not like a strong crypto advocate, so I couldn't give listings of how hashtags have value or power value, etc. I just don't. I'm not that high info on it. But I will say that it was designed primarily as a peer-to-peer transaction network and turned into a store of value, and because of that, ultimately we don't get to, how do I put this? If people decide it's worth something as a store of value, it will be. Whether it's
well, all currency is faith based.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just the way it is. It's always faith based. And I don't disagree with that. And I guess again, now we're getting way off topic. But to kind of
we were talking about the end of the world, and now we're talking about the future of the world.
To kind of veer it back on. Right now, I would say that you don't have anything to worry about in the Israeli-Palestine conflict until some type of catalyst event does happen, and that I think is actually going to be the harder thing to happen rather than the easier thing to happen, because it seems that the entire world is calling for restraint on both sides. Netanyahu already blinked on his initial invasion of Gaza. And it seems like they don't want to commit troops there because they're afraid exactly what that guy was saying. And I was saying before he even came on that this is a mass ambush kill zone. And they do not want to go into these underground facilities and try to root out Hamas fighters who just lost their sons and daughters the night before. Nobody wants to fight that battle. Those are people who are in a desperate bid at that point and fighting for their homeland with nothing to lose. They don't care, right? And that type of population in urban hand-to-hand combat is a nightmare. So I think that if the Jewish state cannot find people to come in and fight on its behalf, that it's going to probably try to move towards de-escalation, because it just simply cannot do this. You know what I mean? It can't do it. Though I think it can defend itself against two fronts if necessary. I think ultimately, even with the battle carriers there, they probably don't want to make that kind of commitment in Gaza.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So yeah, I think that we covered the basics on this. Honestly, none of the numbers, none of the things that are going to happen for the end are really there yet. Obviously what's happening there is horrible. Seeing, Orthodox Christians, dead and doing mass burials is tragic.
Well, and that part is going to get worse. While I don't think they want to commit ground troops, I think that they are going to blast Gaza right off the map and cause a massive exodus of Palestinians into European nations. I think that that's a likely scenario. So I do think that they'll try to level. I do think they'll try to level Gaza to the point where this will become a humanitarian crisis and they have to go.
I feel like that is not a. I feel like that's their intended goal, because they've had IDF leaders saying things like, they did this to us, so we're going to get rid of them, and they're going to have to go out to Europe, or they're America or Europe's problem. That may be what they want, but I don't know that the people are going to be so agreeable to it. And as you mentioned, now, if you believe that they're going to just flatten Gaza, I believe that if they did that, I believe the state of Israel wouldn't exist in about a month and a half, because that would turn public opinion against it so harshly. Nobody would know, and anyone like us with the aircraft carriers there, we wouldn't want our hands to touch that at that point.
Do you know what an FF event is? I think you know what an FF event. Yeah, I don't want to even say that out loud on your channel. Okay.
Okay. Wait, can that get me banned or something?
Yeah.
I've said false flag like a million times.
Okay. Well, maybe nobody cares then on your channel, but it's likely to me that the justification to go after Gaza because of the fear of committing ground troops inside of urban combat with desperate people who are at that point fighting for their homes and fighting for their own ideology. This would be the equivalent of, let's say, people invading Texas, and after having bombed the hell out of Texas, the Texans really, I don't think, would be able to wait. They would be kind of sitting there like this, going, "Yeah, come over our border, you sons of bitches." You know what I mean? And that's exactly what Hamas and the Palestinians are waiting for. There's fathers all over that area right now, armed to the teeth with AK-47s in their underground bunkers and facilities, waiting for the Israelis to invade because they can't wait to gun them down. That is at the top of their list, and they don't give a shit. The Israelis know that this is a huge problem. They've already run anytime they've sent out probes, and I talked about this almost as soon as the conflict began, that this is a mass ambush trap. When they've sent out probes, the probes have been completely eviscerated. So, and we're talking just squads of 10 to 12. They're not doing very hot. They're under fire almost instantly. They have to pull back. But I think that if I were Israel, if I were in a leadership position and I knew that committing ground forces there would end up in a massive Arab victory, even if I had won, even if I got the hostages out and achieved my military victories, the bloodbath that would happen against my own soldiers would be such that the Arabs would declare victory. I might look at some other pretext for why I'm not sending in troops, but instead I'm sending over missiles and tanks and mortars and shit like that. That's what I would do. So if that's what I would do if I was in that type of position, I have no reason to believe that they're not thinking along the exact same line. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was suddenly a poisonous gas attack, or there was suddenly a
white phosphorus.
Yeah, there was suddenly a massive bombing that was way bigger than people anticipated Hamas had the capability of. Something like this, which gave the justification for why we can't send troops in, but we absolutely have to root them out.
So would you say that you're of the school then that if this was that this could have very well been an Israeli false flag attack simply to take out Gaza to begin with, like kind of predetermined?
Well, I don't think so, because I think the timing was bad for the Jewish state, but I think the timing was good for the Arab state. So it would not actually surprise me if they interlinked with some of these underground facilities under Israel, and they were able to come up from the underground facilities and do this kind of preemptive attack behind the wall. And that what the cope was to the public from the Israelis was we just didn't have it manned at the time, right? We just didn't have the wall manned at the time. And so these guys with parachutes came in. I don't know that that's true. I think it's far more likely that hundreds of Hamas fighters were able to dig into these tunnel systems, and they came up that way, caught the Israelis with their pants down, literally, and were able to kill a whole shitload of them and then escape. They were able to escape. You see, you only see a couple of cars driving off, right? But wouldn't they have to go back through the same wall system? So where the hell did they go? You know, they didn't jump over the wall. So where the hell did they go? Well, they probably went back underground through the same exact systems. Some of the hostages who were liberated have remarkable stories about how they were blindfolded and felt like they were taken through winding tunnel systems, they're saying. So this does not surprise me a bit if that's what happened, but that the Israeli response has to be such that they get rid of Hamas doing this again, but can't commit their troops into Gaza. So it's kind of complex, but if I were them, if I were the unilateral dictator of Israel, I would definitely set it up for a false flag, so I had justification to level Gaza.
Oh, I tend to agree. I think that's a pretty solid assessment. I think it would be probably optically the worst thing they could possibly do,
which is why they need justification.
Yeah, and
remember when after the Twin Towers went down, okay, and then we invaded Iraq in 2003.
Yeah,
the UN said no. The global powers said no. We're not going to help you with this war at all. Bush said, "Go to hell. We don't care. We'll form our own alliance anyway because we have the biggest guns, and we'll just do whatever the hell we want. We have an act of Congress that trumps an act of the UN." And the UN's hand was basically tied. They condemned it many, many times, but they couldn't do much else. It's because Bush had like great justification in public opinion. And when people see something like that, when it's played kind of over and over and over,
I
and
remember.
over, and it seeps into the psyche, they want revenge. They get into this kind of like revenge porn mentality, right? Where they're like, yeah, let's go get them. Let's level the whole place. But wait till our boys get there. Now you're going to see, now you're going to pay. And I think that the Israelis need an event like that in order to get the justification to do what they want. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there was one. That's all I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but then, I mean, even now, because one thing to remember is that this whole thing happened while Israel was on the brink of civil war anyway, because of the issues with the judicial system that Netanyahu was making changes with. So ultimately, if this was the false flag they were aiming for, they didn't get what they want. I mean, there's an increasing number of, pacifist groups in Israel who are like, no, we don't want this. And they don't even have a united public opinion there.
Yeah, I don't think that the initial attack was a false flag. I don't think so
I
at
see.
all.
So, okay, so you're saying that one may be coming. Okay.
Yeah, and I've never thought so.
Okay.
I don't think that it was good from in any sense of the word, and the Israelis are completely caught by surprise by it. They were completely caught by surprise. There's no doubt. Even the people I talked to who are on the ground there, they didn't see it coming. They usually get some kind of chatter, you know what I mean? But just nobody saw it coming. Again, I think it was an opportunistic attack that probably was based around the fact that they were quickly able to assess that they had access somehow into this place, probably from underground, and they were able to organize quite quickly into a low-tech attack with AK-47s on the street. They grabbed hostages real quick, and now's as good a time as any, right? They wouldn't get that opportunity again to make their prison break, so they did it. And now the Israelis have to deal with it.
Now, I've been on the school because a lot of people have noticed that because of the surprise nature of the attack that started all this, the question of why did Israeli intelligence fail? The earliest reports I heard was that it was most likely that their intelligence was simply compromised, which would have made that easier. That was immediately dropped off to where the conspiracy theory kind of sort of thing happened. Like, how could this possibly happen? Maybe it was a false flag.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying, but kind of think of it from in these terms, like on the US-Mexico border, daily there's skirmishes back and forth between, I mean, maybe not daily, but at least weekly. There's skirmishes between drug cartels. There's daily. Okay, so there's skirmishes all over the place, all over that border. With the U.S. Border Patrol, let's say our wall guard, you know what I mean, this kind of thing. But you can imagine how caught unaware, even then, even though that happens every day, if suddenly hundreds or thousands, of Hispanics suddenly just kind of appeared in Texas, on the Texas border in the middle of a town, armed to the teeth, and just started mowing down civilians. Like, we would not see that coming. We would be absolutely stun-locked by such an event. We would be stun-locked by it. And that's kind of the feeling I get from that region. From the people I talked to there, is that they were actually stun-locked. They just could not believe that these people had access this way. And a lot of them did not believe in the parachute fan bullshit. You know what I mean? Oh, look, they parachuted over the wall. From where? You know what I mean? Well, they had this device and it blew air back and it made the you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a paraglider system. But the point is, for the most part, that was just the concert. I don't think they did that anywhere else. So
again, I think that the simplest explanation, usually the correct explanation, is probably an opportunistic attack. That probably geopolitics didn't even fall into it nearly as much as people want to think, but we always try to go for like the chessboard approach rather than the opportunistic approach. They saw a chance, they took it, they killed a bunch of them. That's probably as far as they thought about it.
Well, now, what do you think about the fact that Hamas was referring to this in reference, like even the name of their operation was Al-Aqsa Storm? All of their propaganda has been focused internally in Gaza and the West, Gaza, on the Al-Aqsa Mosque and protecting it.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they had planned this attack to achieve those ends. So again, I still think that this particular attack was probably done opportunistically. That's what it looked like to me. Well, it didn't look like so you would think in an attack that was planned out, you would have military targets, actual objections or objectives, if you were going to take hostages, you would take high value hostages, right? You wouldn't just take civilians because, I mean, let's face it, ultimately civilians are expendable. Okay, they really are. Or you would try to sabotage some target of strategic importance. They really didn't do any of that.
Well, they
They
did
really-
get 2 generals.
What's that?
They got 2 generals.
Yeah, but again, did they get them because they were going for them, or did they get them because there was opportunity and so they were able to?
I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. They're still high value targets.
Yeah, that's true. But the point is did they plan on getting those high value targets is the question. And again, it just looks opportunistic to me.
That's
How does
very possible.
Andrew know what?
How does Andrew think that Israel has the best intelligence in the world? Even in Pearl Harbor, the U.S. knew what was coming. Well,
The best intelligence. You know how good their propaganda is? Their propaganda is so good, you believe they have the best intelligence in the world. That's how good their propaganda is.
that's also a very true point because, if you're to listen to Israeli propaganda, they have basically the best skills, the best army, the best
army, the best. They even have the best food, right? They have the best everything. It's the safest place to live. They're the most ethical army on planet Earth. They're the most everything. And it's like, look, don't be fucking stupid. Of course they don't have the best intelligence army or the best intelligence on planet Earth. Of course they don't. They wouldn't even have the means to. They probably have a skilled intelligence agency. That's true. But no, I'm highly skeptical that it's the bestest on Earth. And by the way, even if it was, does that just mean it can't fail?
And it's not invulnerable. It could still be compromised.
And it was also the fact that even if you have the best intelligence on Earth, that's why our opportunistic strikes, right, are often the go-to from people who are dealing with sophisticated intelligence agencies. It's always assumed the intelligence agency knew it was coming because maybe they heard some chatter. That doesn't mean they know what it means. And again, that would still point to an opportunistic strike.
Okay. Just to touch on this, because we haven't really, but it does involve obviously not just orthodoxy, but it could be related to the end of the world, etc. I noticed YouTube asked to take special care when talking about Ukraine because you don't want to imply that you don't care about Ukraine or Russia on YouTube. I guess that's one of their new things I saw this week. But what's your take on this in this circumstance? Because it seems like Ukraine has kind of taken the position, well, Zelensky's taken the position that he's like pro-Israel, and Russia has kind of almost decided to move in a semi-opposite, we also sort of support Israel, but also Palestine sort of thing. So, I mean, they're in the middle of a war themselves, which nobody's heard about in the past month. So I don't even know if they're still fighting or if they just all started watching. They are. Well, yeah. So the point is,
and it's not going very well for Ukraine at all.
No, it hasn't. Now, how do you see this playing out in this general? What's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of backdrop. Do you see like these two wars relating in any way, shape, or form?
Well, they could potentially. Of course, right now it seems no. It seems like this is a European affair, which had nothing at all to do with the geopolitical affairs in the Middle East, and that this to me, this whole little teeny tiny region, right, ultimately is not that important on the global stage. It really isn't that important. There's a lot of undue influence globally that comes out of Israel. That's true. But ultimately, the affairs of the region, not particularly important, right? They just sell us shit that we want, like oil.
So when you're talking about Iran, and they could just shut down the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, that's gonna.
They can't shut it down.
No, I'm pretty sure they can.
They can't. Nope. We can anytime we want to. We can just open it right back up. In fact, if we went in there with heavy naval forces, the United States Navy, the straits would get opened up so quickly there wouldn't even be a fight. They would be so ridiculously outgunned. What ends up happening inside of this little teeny tiny region, while it's interesting to look at, it really doesn't affect anybody that much. It's just that we all kind of want it to, but it really doesn't. Like, what is it that you think that they're outsourcing to us besides oil? And that's not coming out of Israel. You know what I mean? It's not
No.
coming out of Palestine. That's coming out of the neighboring Arab nations. But even then, they're still going to sell it to us. It's not like the Saudis are going to stop selling us oil. There's nothing that they're exporting really except bad ideology. And so this kind of local occurred conflict, everybody's waiting for it to explode. What's happening in Europe is actually still a lot more indicative of what could launch into a global war than what's going on in the Middle East, which, if we stayed out of it and the West stayed out of it, would still be a localized affair to the Middle East. The problem is that the war powers all want to get together and police everything, the same way that they've been doing with Russia, Ukraine. And that could expand into a European war, and then we'd have a major problem. But thus far, it's been able to stay kind of isolated with just these two countries going at it, with everybody kind of understanding that Ukraine inevitably is going to end up being absorbed by Russia, or a good part of it is. And they've just kind of accepted that this is reality. You know what I mean? They're going to fight the good fight until they're done. But over in, the smaller area between Israel and Gaza, we're talking about this little teeny tiny patch of land in Gaza. I mean, this is a teeny city. It has a lot of people in it, but it's tiny. So, ultimately, how this plays out on global affairs is going to depend on how much global people in the global community want to stick their noses into it, which right now seems like everybody is. But until I see one nation move in or move tanks in or anything like this, I wouldn't panic about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tiny place, but keep in mind it's also one of the most congested places in the world. There's 2 million people there. So, well, minus 5,000. But the point is, yeah, it's a lot of people. So that's part of the reason why I think it would be, if they carpet bomb Gaza, it won't, I don't think it'll go the way anyone's expecting. But
well, I mean, it may not, but yeah. I think it's coming. I think that it's like, in fact, if I had to bet right now, if you said, bet me $20 what you think is going to happen right now, I would bet you that there's a limited excursion of ground troops that get cut to ribbons by fighters inside of that strip, and that they then move over into massive aerial bombardment and missile strikes.
Okay, now that's interesting, because that would indicate to me that at least that would put the side of the coin flip more towards apocalypse, because a victory like that, while it would cause global outrage, would give the Palestinians the free hand to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and put the third temple. At least that's the way I see it. If they
You mean the Israelis?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you said it would give the Hamas. So you mean
the Israelis?
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
It would give the Israelis a free hand to basically just blow up the mosque, which is something that's been discussed and so on and so forth. And then they can just build their temple there. So that, to me, it seems like you're closer to the side where you're closer on the apocalypse side than, most people realize, or I realize, because, if they can do that, that kind of opens that door.
For an event down the road, maybe. But
Well,
the thing is, it's like, that's going to happen no matter what. They want it to happen. They're going to make sure that it happens at some point. The governments there want it to happen, and the religious fanatics there want it to happen. They're going to make it happen. They want to rebuild the temple.
Well, yeah, I don't think anyone outside of the hardcore Temple Institute types really wants to rebuild the temple. Like, even most Israelis don't want to rebuild the temple. But the whole point is, then the opportunity would be there to rebuild the temple. And it's worth noting that attempts to rebuild the temple have pretty much all ended in failure for the past 1900 years.
But what most of them do want is they want the Palestinians gone.
That is true.
They want them all gone. They don't want some of them gone. They don't want to have a 10% left ethnic minority there. They want all of them to vacate. And I think that they're going to find justification due to their own security to make sure that happens.
Maybe. I guess it's just, we still got to play out that time and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I could be totally wrong too. It's just how I see it right now.
Yeah. And that's true. The wall is highly monitored. And so, yeah, that's ultimately, All I would say is this: since people are continually discussing prophecies, etc., in Orthodox circles, really, when you look at what's actually on the ground, not enough has actually happened yet. That's my opinion. Um, and ultimately, it sounds like something could happen. And I mean, if you're you're pretty certain they're going to flatten Gaza. I'm hoping that that's not what happens, because that could go so bad in so many different ways.
Well, how else are they going to get them out? I mean,
well, the assumption is that they're success, that they want it. We know they want to get them out, but clearly they've been trying to get them out for the past 50 years and they haven't done a very good job.
Yeah, but they've never had justification like this before. I mean, they're going to, when they commit ground soldiers to this region, when they go across into the Gaza Strip with their ground soldiers, the only thing that prevents them flattening Gaza is if they get no resistance. Okay, if they get no resistance and the hostages are turned over and Hamas quits, then yeah, they won't flatten Gaza. But if they go in there and it's a bunch of peasants with AK-47s opening up, which I think it's going to be, and pipe bombs and hand grenades and any other small arms that they've been able to beg, borrow, and steal in order to get, I think that they're ready. I think they have holes all over the place in their own little independent bunkers. I think they have traps which are ready for the light armor. I think that they have everything that they could ever need, and they can't wait for the IDF to enter into that strip, because I think that they're going to just rip them to pieces, and they can't wait to do it.
I agree. And now the thing is, I mean, the way they've been using the hostages, first off, this hostage strategy to tempt Israel into Gaza is not new. I mean, they've been using that now for 30 years now.
It's good strategy from a strategic point of view.
Yeah, it seems to work. So they've just kind of made a bigger version of the typical strategy, because usually it's 2 or 3, people that they get, not like 150, because they're using them very carefully. Like, they'll release one hostage for every other 3rd or 4th day they don't bomb Gaza, which gives you lots of time if you're using, they're using the strategy as effectively as they can. The question is, you mentioned, when does Israel decide it's expendable? I don't know from a PR standpoint that they can, even blowing up all of Gaza, but killing 100 Israelis still.
They'll just blame them. I mean, even if they kill their own civilians there, they just end up blaming the Palestinians for doing it anyway. So, I mean, that's the whole thing, is like, even if the Israelis send over a missile strike tomorrow and it killed 30 of their civilians who they were trying to rescue, they would just say that, hey, we got there and Hamas blew them up. Look at these monsters. You know what I mean? Okay. Like, that's what they do. That's what they do.
Bombing sort of deal. Like, they wouldn't be able to do that while they're there. But if because how would you blame Hamas if you level Gaza? Like, it's
yeah. Well, no, I agree with that. I'm just saying that, at this point, they're looking at the hostage rescue situations and the hostage rescue plans, but they don't really know what to do because they can't see underground. And that's where these hostages are. They're stationed all over in underground facilities inside of that strip. So they're not going to be able to find them without sending in a full-fledged ground invasion, which is why they called up every reservist in that nation. They're all armed to the teeth and arming. And right now they're just trying to whip the reservists into shape, right? They're buying time too, just trying to get the reservists to where they can walk down the street without running out of breath inside their military uniform, because they haven't served in 15 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that, they got a big problem on their hands. The Israeli military at this point is nothing more, their ground forces, than state militia. If you send in your reservists, which are just state militia, you're going to get exactly the results that you would expect to get from a state militia going up a civilian populace. So.
All right. Well, I think that that pretty much covers kind of what we were going to talk about today. But ultimately, it's been an interesting talk, and I'm glad to have had you on. It's kind of always nice to talk. Even though I know you have your opinions on some things, and I'll just leave that to that. But let me see here if there were any questions, because most of the questions kind of got covered live. Like, some people pointed out some things. Checking. No, I put up the Julian the Apostate quote. Anyway, no, that's all I've got for today. I mean, it was an interesting discussion. kind of went into a bunch of different areas.
All good discussions do.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, if there's anything else you want to ask about or talk about, that's fine. I'll let you.
Nope, I've got a pizza waiting for me, and I'm still
Oh
recovering
man,
from this nasty cold. I don't know. I picked it up over at this wedding, and man, it really
you okay?
it's really kicked my ass the last week. No, I'm fine. It's just
Yeah.
I've always worked when I'm sick. I'm one of those guys, right? It's like unless I'm in my deathbed, I'm gonna work. So
Was that Zen's wedding or?
yeah.
Oh, congratulations to him. That's cool.
Yeah, that was at his wedding, and I think he has it now. And I was like, well, that's justice, that's justice. That's what you
Yes,
get.
you ruined his honeymoon. That's totally fair.
That's right. I feel fine about it. You know what I mean? I have justification, right? Justification. So anyway, I appreciated the convo. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Likewise. Have a great night.
You too, man. Thanks for having me on your channel, by the way.
No problem. Likewise. All right. Well, that was interesting, and I'm gonna call it a night, and maybe we'll see what else we can do from here. I got another book, just so you know. This text is actually in the other book, so it's redundant. However, basically, I'm going to be reviewing that next week, and we're going to continue with some more of On Resistance to Evil by Force. And so that's I think that's it for now. The rest of this week is just going to be clips from, I guess, Sundays and tonight's episode. I want to thank everyone for listening, for supporting, for visiting, new visitors, and it's been we'll be back soon. And this was kind of semi-planned, and I got to get better at planning, guys. I'll just be honest. All right, everyone. Good night. God bless, and thank you.